A visual guide for every control map in Overwatch. For reference, green highlighted areas are super important spaces to control, red areas are sightlines that you need to be wary of, and blue areas are flanks or rotations that you can make. Let's begin in alphabetical order from A to Z. Antarctica Peninsula Icebreaker. Thankfully, Antarctica in general is quite rudimentary with its map control because this high ground is super important to control. You can either push this high ground yourself in the mid-fight or flank around coast and engage from behind. If holding the point, you can hold some pretty nasty close holds with someone controlling the angle in the ship, and for holding point, your backlink can again play and use that high ground in the mid-fight. As for the little high ground on point, that can be quite cute to use, but I only recommend doing so in the mid-fight with heroes who don't mind playing short to medium sightlines. Antarctic Peninsula Labs. For more ranged teams, while I recommend going coast side, it's really the opposite side of the map that's more important to control, I think. You have easy access to the other half of the map, great LOS into point, and good cover to use as well. That goes for both the retakes and holding the points. Antarctic Peninsula sub-level. Really easy and really simple here, whoever controls this high ground will win the points. It's basically as simple as that. Do note the weird flank routes on the other side of the map, which Sombra and Tracer can certainly use to their advantage. If you're playing ranged heroes, you'll likely use the back high ground and then look to rotate to the high ground as the fight devolves. Busan Downtown. The really important space to control is of course the high ground that surrounds the points. Be wary of the long sightlines that heroes like Widowmaker like to use, and consider using the right side flank in Cinema, which is actually pretty underrated because of the cover and the mega. Where teams really get tripped up on are the retakes. One really simple trick is that on retakes, just make sure you're going through the window instead of going down the choke, and then look to spread out and take angles from there. I've seen some teams path coast side to take points, but just make sure that you take high ground while you're at it and don't get booped off the map. Busan Sanctuary. Controlling coast side can be really important here, but it varies with the comp that you're playing. If you're playing range, look to play the other side of the map and keep rotating around if you're going to get rushed on or dived on. However, if you're playing a shorter ranged comp, look to use the cover the coast side provides and the short sightlines that it provides too to help close the distance. Busan Mecha Base. Please on retakes, think about pushing on the other side of the map, or perhaps pretending that you're going to push the other side, but instead, you push through main. As for the points, again, the high ground space is really important to control. Keep your ranged heroes on that coast side high ground too, and just whatever you do, don't go underneath please. You're just gonna walk into the enemy's angles, and you're gonna get battered from high grounds. Ilios Lighthouse. Super simple to run brawl comps with, just TP to points and use the cover that surrounds you to force points, or you can teleport on the enemy backline. As for any other comp, this piece of high ground is super important to control, and flankers can look to stage dives onto it as well by flanking around. Ilios Well. Heroes like Farah and Echo will love coming coastside due to the cover and ability to close the distance very quickly. This map is pretty open in general for flankers, so supports, again, you're gonna have to keep moving. And also, mind the big gaping hole in the middle of the map. Ilios Ruins. Very long sightlines for Widowmaker that you still need to be careful of even after the fall off nerf. The coastside piece of the map is probably the most important section to control, but the high ground opposite side is also really important too. The best players will definitely be looking to utilize those angles in the mid-fights. Lijang Night Market. Obviously, there's the classic teleport strat that literally every team does. On both retakes and when you're holding the point, coastside is super underrated to control. You have multiple rotations you can make to get to different angles, just make sure you don't get booped off the map. As for retakes, this is where it can get a bit messy. If you're not going to go full brawl, I recommend going Echo, Farah, Sombra or Tracer to pincer the enemy team from behind and to control coast. As for the rest of the map, if you're running Mei, you can hold close and look for a clean wall. If you're the enemy team here, likewise the Busan Downtown, just retake through the high grounds if the enemy team are holding close. Lijang Control Center, another classic sim brawl map. This is super short sightlines, but there are some things you can do. For example, aerial heroes like Echo and Farah can use the top high ground to spam from below, heroes like Hanzo and Ashe can flank towards the coast side, or even take coast to get a great angle on the entire point. On retakes, White Room is the most important area to control. Great cover, great LOS, you can flank to the enemy backline, and you have a mini to play around. DPS and support players look to control this. Lijang Gardens. Yet another classic sim point where you TP to points, play cover, and force points. Yes, I know, very innovative. As for the space control, Dojo I think is really important. I've said this to players I've coached before, but Dojo has good cover, a mega, great angles and rotations, there's just no reason to not play it. As for White Room, because of how restrictive the sightlines are, I don't often recommend playing it. Nepal Village. Likewise to Lijang, you'll see some teams teleport to points, and with cover, force the points, and then with the Mei, wall off anyone who touches. Certainly something you can do in ranked. Aside from that, the middle high ground adjacent to points, I think, is pretty important to control because you can rotate and move anywhere from it. You can rotate and flank behind, you can rotate and spam the choke, etc. Nepal Shrine. Forget main, the angles around the point are what matters. You'll see most players fight over elephant, and for good reason. Not only do you have a good angle onto the entirety of point, but you can flank and catch any backline squishies or heroes walking backwards. The opposite side is good for this too, but it's a bit less open and can take you a bit longer to reach, depending on what hero you play. Nepal Sanctum. Similar to one of the Antarctica maps, whoever controls the high ground basically wins the map. There's great cover, great LOS, a mega by coast side, there's no reason to not play it unless you're a flanker, in which case, you can go mega side and look to access the enemy backline that way. It's actually not uncommon to see heroes hard flank all the way around the map just to access the enemy backline, and if timed well, this can be a legit strat. In terms of rollouts, if you're running something more ranged, I advise going coast side with the cars, but if you're running something more brawly, then I advise going up the elevator and taking high grounds. The reason for this is that the sightlines by the elevator are quite short, and if you are playing a ranged comp, you can get stomped on quite easily. However, the high ground that this point provides is still super important to control. Don't be afraid to also use the centerpiece of high ground too, it's there for a reason. In terms of holding, while it does obviously depend on your comp, you can hold relatively close and control the opposite side, or you can look to play point and utilize your high grounds. Oasis Gardens. This point is actually very reminiscent of Antarctica Peninsula sublevel because of that center high ground. It sticks out like a sore thumb, and in 99% of games, whoever spends more resources controlling or utilizing this high ground will likely win the map. Just try not to get booped off because that certainly has happened before. Shout out my Lucio and Farah players. And last but not least, Oasis University. Because of the short, enclosed sightlines and the obvious chokes here, Mei rush comps are quite popular. You just look to play points and wall off the entry, or when you're holding, you can look to push up and get a juicy wall on enemy retakes. If you're playing more of a ranged comp, I recommend trying to control the high ground coast side to pressure out any brawly heroes from afar. However, White Room is also another flank you can take as either a DPS or support, and it takes less time than walking all the way to the high grounds. A great mid-fight option. And that's it for the video. I hopefully plan on doing this for every type of map mode there is, and then combining them into one video, including the upcoming Flashpoint mode too. Shout out to my tier 2 Patreon and channel member, Broken by 50%, as well as my other members, XBenny, T-Meg, Chris Jones, Craig, 9socks, Reslucio, and Salspring, and until next time.